work of our brave military service members who work day and night to keep Americans safe. So many have suffered at the brutal hand of ISIS. Senators will learn more about the operation later this morning during our classified all-senators briefing with Secretary Austin and other senior administration officials. On USICA, the American Competes Act. In the first year under President Biden and the Senate Democratic majority, America saw its strongest economic growth in decades, including increases in wages, very, very important to the American people who have not seen enough of that over the last 2 decades. And this week, Congress is taking a major step to build on that success by advancing legislation that will help lower costs, relieve U.S. supply chains, and bring manufacturing back to the United States. Over the next 2 days, the House will debate and vote to pass a companion bill to the Senate's U.S. Innovation and Competition Act, which we approved last summer, of course, with strong bipartisan support. I'm pleased the House is taking this important step. I've been pushing for months for progress on this legislation to strengthen supply chains and boost our technological competitiveness. Senators from both sides of the aisle want to see a competition and technology bill finally enacted. After this week, we will hopefully be one step closer to achieving that goal. Americans are demanding bold solutions to help lower the cost of living, and businesses from coast to coast need help to relieve supply chains strained by the pandemic. Legislation along the lines of USICA is just what the doctor ordered. It would provide the long-term help our country needs to lower costs and help businesses grow right here at home. Jobs here in America, not overseas. One of the best examples of why this bill is needed is our nation's dangerous chip shortage. The shortage has sent shockwaves across the economy, hamstringing the production of everything from cars, cell phones, refrigerators, medical devices, equipment used by our military. It has increased the costs of all of those items, and American families are paying for those costs. USICA would help relieve them and make sure these supply chain bottlenecks are relieved. Our proposal would provide $52 billion to help relieve those supply chain pressures and bring production back to America. Instead of relying on other countries for our chips, let's bring these jobs back home. Typically, it's America that provides the research, the R&D, and cutting-edge chips. But somehow this country has allowed them all to be made, or the vast majority of them to be made overseas. Let's make them here with good manufacturing jobs, in addition to making sure we stay at the top of the game in terms of research. USICA does both, increases R&D, increases manufacturing jobs, all here in America. So I want to commend my colleagues for pushing this legislation forward. Of course, we'll have much more work to do to bridge our 2 proposals together, but the House's vote this week sets us on a necessary course to passing these policies into law. On SCOTUS, yesterday I met with President Biden at the White House to discuss a broad range of issues on the Democratic agenda. One of the most important matters we covered was his intention to nominate the first black woman justice to the Supreme Court. I reiterated the same commitment I've made all week. When President Biden makes his nominee known to the nation, I will move to have the Senate consider and confirm her as soon as possible. I will see to it that the process is fair, that members on both sides of the aisle can evaluate questions and get to know the nominee, but we'll also move quickly. Everything seems to be on track to get that done, to move the nominee quickly through the courts. President Biden is not expected through the Congress. President Biden is not expected to announce his nominee for a few weeks, but we already know one thing. The president's pledge to name a black woman to the Supreme Court is historic. There have been 115 justices who have sat on the court since 1789. Only 5 of them have ever been women, none until 1981. Only 2 have been African American, but never, never has there been an African American woman who still make up barely 6% of the federal judiciary. And amazing, until 1981, this powerful body, the Supreme Court, was all white men. Imagine. America wasn't all white men in 1981, or ever. Under President Biden, and this Senate majority, we're taking historic steps to make the courts look more like the country they serve by confirming highly qualified, diverse nominees. A quarter of all African American women who sit on the federal bench were nominated by this administration and approved by this Senate. Just hear that. 25% of African American women who sit on the federal bench came through this Senate this year. That's the progress we've made in a relatively short amount of time. In fact, nearly 70% of all president's nominees have been non-white, dwarfing the record of every single president since at least Jimmy Carter. And some say, well, why was that? Because the bench has been almost all white, as I said, 100% all white males until 1981. We have some ground to make up so the courts can represent America. These aren't abstract facts and figures. Who we put on the bench matters. The personal experience of that each judge brings to bear cannot be merely glanced over. When Americans come before the courts and look up at who presides in the courtroom, they should trust that those who render judgment on them will be able to understand each litigant's lived experience and bring a modicum of human understanding required to apply the law equitably. The best way we can do that is to elevate judges from a broad range of backgrounds. Diversity in all its forms matter. It's good for the justice system, and it's really vital, Madam President, to the health of our democracy. President Biden's nominees are also extremely well qualified. We're not sacrificing qualifications and excellence for diversity. President Biden's nominees are both more diverse and more qualified than any president in recent history. I'm proud of the accomplishments we've secured to bring this past year to bring balance to our federal courts. Now on NOM's progress. Yesterday was a good day on the Senate floor. We held 12 roll call votes, 12 roll call votes on a number of President Biden's nominees to his administration and to the federal bench. Half of these votes took place in the evening. I'm glad we dispensed with them efficiently and without needless delay. I want to thank all my colleagues for their cooperation and flexibility as we move through the large number of votes. We want to be able to keep doing this. We want to be able to work with similar speed next time a large number of votes are lined up on the floor. And maybe some of them, like last night, will go by voice. Some of these there's no reason to have a vote on except a few, just a handful, not the vast majority of the other party, insist we have votes on all of them, which only lengthens the process but doesn't deter us from moving forward on these nominees. Of the 20 nominees I filed at the end of the last work period, we've confirmed or invoked cloture on all but 3 of them, and today we expect to hold cloture votes on the other 3. Again, it's an unusually large number of roll call votes for nominees that typically pass with unanimous consent. Obstruction from the small group of Republicans, only a small group, not the majority, not close to the majority, has forced us to work through these individuals one by one, but last night, with the cooperation of everybody, we were able to move quickly. So I thank my colleagues for their good work and cooperation. And finally, once again on book banning, I want to return to the point I made yesterday about the wave of book bannings we're seeing in our public libraries and our school districts across the country. We shouldn't kid ourselves about the scary nature of these Orwellian attacks from the far right. Because when far-right legislators in places like Texas demand that schools turn over their reading lists, or when a school district in Tennessee bans a graphic novel that teaches about the Holocaust, or when reactionary voices hide behind claims of indecency and offensiveness any time they attack works that explore issues of racism or identity or social injustice, then we're not seeing free intimidation. We're not seeing free expression. We're seeing intimidation. That's what book bannings are about. They are efforts to intimidate educators and students away from exploring difficult issues, to obscure parts of our history the far right doesn't like, and to perpetuate and even champion ignorance of our own past. We don't need to look very far in history to see what happens when we go down a dangerous road of censorship, suppression. When free expression is weakened, the mob is empowered. These unprecedented efforts by the far right to ban books that explore injustice and racism are deeply disturbing and nakedly Orwellian. They should be opposed at the state level before more damage is done to our students and to our country. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.